everybody, and welcome to Autism Awakening, the podcast that helps you help your child with autism. I'm really excited to have on another guest speaker. This is Jeanetta Bryant. She's with the Abilities Workshop, and I've worked with her. How long, Jeanetta, now?
Oh gosh, since
years?
Abilities has been in existence, you've been a supporter and a collaborator, so almost 5 years.
That is awesome. Time flies, and the whole COVID brain and when things happened in life kind of get mixed up. But I'm really excited to have you on, and I'm excited for families to listen to what you have to offer, because again, I've been doing this podcast and Facebook Live for over 5 years now, and people have heard me talk a lot. So I'm starting to get some great speakers to join us. So I'm really glad that you're here.
Well, I'm really glad to be here. And, I'm always a fan. I was a fan of yours years and years before you knew who I was. I remember going to a conference and hearing you, and I latched on to the fact that there was this doctor that had so much hope, that you had so many answers up your sleeve. And it was, they all might not work for your child, but one of them might, and you need to be hopeful. And that was from an age, I'm talking 10 years ago, where people weren't talking about hope the same way. I mean, 20 years ago, it was really obscure. 10 years ago, it started coming around. But now, if you're a family, you should be living with hope, because there are just so many encouraging stories of success that I've seen unfold before me, and they're out there everywhere.
Exactly. And that's what people need. And there's so much not negativity, but there's so many lack of answers when you go to your typical pediatrician, or you talk to family members, or for people who don't know, for people who aren't in the autism world, they're not aware that there's so many things that we can do to help our kids improve and recover and speak and have better behavior and be independent when they grow up, which is what every parent wants.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. I'm telling you that over the last few years, I've just watched this explosion. But the problem is that when you said not negativity, but there is negativity. We've got all of these negative Nancys that are in Facebook group books that are trying to squash our dreams and try to put out the fire of fighting for our kids. I'm just going to tell you straight up, if you're in one of those groups, you need to leave. They are not going to help you or your child be their better selves. They're simply going to aggravate you and give you stress for the next 3 or 4 hours of your life, when you have plenty of other things to be thinking about and doing.
Yeah, they definitely are out there, and whether that's people who have just kind of tried things before that haven't worked for them, or there's other groups out there that just don't think our kids need help. And I've come face to face with people like that, and my answer to those people is that if somebody is looking for help, we are here to provide. If you are somebody who doesn't want help, that's fine. But don't push down other people who want to help their kids, or other people who want to help themselves, because that's why we're here.
Exactly. So do you want me to jump into our story a little bit and why I think that I might have some good insight to help folks with?
That would be great. Why don't you tell people? We've been on here for a few minutes, and again, Thanks for everybody who watches live. And for those of you who are watching later, you can always tune into a live recording of our podcast on Thursday, 12:15 p.m. Eastern Time, on our Facebook Spectrum Awakening page. But yeah, Jeanetta, please kind of go into everything you talked about last week when we had our technological issues, about your journey and what you have to offer families.
Sure. So I was very fortunate to have the experience of being led to the water, if you will, on knowing that the biomedical community exists, that hope exists, and that there are answers out there for our kids. That was a very fortunate thing in my life, to be able to latch onto that so quickly. But it was 10 years ago. We just passed the 10-year anniversary. My daughter is Lindsay. She has autism. She is 13. When she was 18 months is when we started seeing all of the warning signs, and we got a globally developmentally delayed diagnosis. You fast forward, at that time, they didn't diagnose autism until they were 3. And so you fast forward, she turns 3. And we have a developmental pediatrician say she has ADD, ADHD, expressive language disorder, regressive language disorder, hypotonia, and autism. By the way, she's never going to speak again. She's never going to have any social or academic gains. She's never going to, was the theme of about 5 minutes. And it was really somebody trying to steal the hope and encouragement that we were just talking about. And I just remember being in that moment somewhat paralyzed with this new prognosis and death sentence that they've just handed my daughter, thinking, surely not. Surely this 3-year-old has more of a future before her than what you're painting it to be. And for those that have ever watched the movie Pretty Woman, that's when I channeled my inner Julia Roberts, right? And I thought to myself, that scene where she says, big mistake, big, huge. When she says that in the movie, I was picturing Lindsay coming back to that doctor, standing before them and saying, big mistake, big, huge. And God just had different plans for Lindsay than what that doctor had expected. When I say that I was so fortunate, I mean, that next day I was in my office conducting interviews, and the last person that came in to do an interview was a lady that was far overqualified. But in that moment, somehow or another, I divulged to this perfect stranger my daughter was diagnosed with autism. She goes, oh, my son too. I've written a book on it. This is what you need to do. And so when I tell you that God literally sent Mary into my office, he sent Mary into my office. She sat there and we talked for 3 hours, and she was the one that introduced me to the idea of diet and changes. And we started implementing them without any guidance at all. We just said, okay, if this is going, of course I went to Barnes and Noble and I packed books all around me, and I realized that she was onto something. But we started just jumping in on saying, if there's a chance for her to have language again, if there's a chance for her to say my name again, I want to do it. And we just went full force. And for probably a year and a half, we did it without any leadership while we were trying to find a doctor. And so we were going to conferences and we were learning as much as we could. And my husband jokingly called Lindsay our little petri dish, because if I thought that it was good for her, I was giving it to her. And then we just kind of sat back and waited, what's going to happen next? And it was, but we started seeing gains, and it was easy to buy into this. And then when we finally got a doctor and trusted them to show us more of the information, we started finding more gains. And so for anybody that's not familiar with what an ATEC score is, that's the Autism Treatment Evaluation Checklist. It's free. It's in 21 different languages. I encourage you to go and do this subjective questionnaire so that you can get a waterline mark on where your child's symptoms are. The higher the number, the more severe the symptoms. The lower the number, the more neurotypical behavior, right? The less autistic behaviors. But numbers go over 100. At the height of Lindsay's symptoms, she was a point, run, scream kid, and she was at a 98. All she did was point, run, scream. And over the years, I'm glad to tell you that she's a 2 now, and that's incredible. But I am also here to share with you that being a 2 on an ATEC score does not mean that you are academically caught up with your peers or socially caught up with your peers, and that there's still a lot of work to do. So if that's the case, fight for the symptoms to go away, but know that there's still work beyond. Anyhow, so my point in telling you all of that is that was our journey at the beginning. We had so many people give us good advice and be able to point us in the right direction. We felt like it was our obligation to pay that forward. And in 2019, we started Abilities Workshop, which the whole premise was something that was scary to me. That was when I had real fun conversation with my husband on saying, you know what? That corporate job that pays a lot of our bills, I'm going to leave that and I'm going to start this nonprofit. So we did, and I thought, surely somebody's doing it smarter, better, faster. They're just doing this already as far as helping parents find answers. But we found that not anybody was doing it quite like we were, because we really wanted to embrace parents and give them this boot camp experience of like, hey, here are your answers. This is what all the different therapy options look like. This is what all of the different medical insights sound like. Let's actually introduce a newly diagnosed family to the idea of the gut-brain connection straight away. Don't lose time on something that you don't need to lose time on. What is an IEP? What are the government benefits? Just here's it all. Pick and choose what you need to move forward with in your family. And that platform has allowed us to meet a lot of families, and it has allowed us to give a lot of encouragement. And I am so grateful, because not only do we do things for newly diagnosed families, but we do them for families in crisis and families that are transitioning into adulthood. We have a podcast. The podcast is really cool because I have doctors such as yourself join me on that. And we talk about these things candidly. On the last session that you and I did, it was hormones and autism. And it's more than just, oh, they're 13, they're going to have a bad attitude. There's so much more complexity to it. And while it seems like a lot to absorb, it's so exciting to understand how it works. And so having the access to doctors like yourself to be able to have those conversations about anxiety and aggression and behavior and language development and hormones and mitochondrial disease and genetics. Oh my gosh, I had the most amazing conversation with Dr. Bowles, and he's talking about his latest research study is the fact that he's now identified 7 genetic pathways that lead to autism, and that 6 of them are treatable. 7 of them, the 7th of the 7 is harder, but still treatable. But I mean, where's that on Good Morning America? That there are 7 pathways to autism and that 6 of the 7 are treatable. Like, come on, guys. I typed a line when I was promoting his episode recently, and it said, autism is treatable. And I sat there in awe of what I typed on the computer, because if anybody had told me that 10 years ago, I probably would have broke out and cried. And nobody will tell you that, and people are scared to tell you that these kids can get better, but they can, and I've seen it, and my child's one of them that's getting better. So, we just try to spread a little bit of hope and encouragement. That's what we do, and we do it by being a giant switchboard operator. Anybody in the country is we work with people all across the country. We've worked with people in different parts of the world. Call us. You got a question, I don't care if it's a program related or not, call us. We want to answer it. If we don't know the answer, we know the people that know the answers. All you have to do is, it's like I live here in Orlando, and sometimes I feel like I steal the line from Disney, but you really do have a friend in me. You have a friend in all of us. You don't have to go it alone. And that's really the premise of what we do every day, is to just let people know you're not in this alone. We'll come alongside of you, and there are answers out there. And we've just benefited immensely. So when I say Lindsay was point, run, scream kid, now she talks, she dances hip hop, she ice skates, she has water skied. I'm trying to think of all the things that she's done, but it's an enormous amount of things. It still means that we have hard work to do ahead of us. Because of my conversation with Dr. Bowles, we are definitely going to be doing extra genetic testing to find out if there are any speed bumps that we didn't uncover along the way. I don't tell any of the different people that are joining us right now any of this so that you feel overwhelmed. I'm telling you that there are so many answers now. And if the first 3 don't work, there's like 30, 40, 50 other answers out there that might. So don't give up on your kid. They're counting on you to be their champion. There's a lot of pressure, but it's true.
Yeah, and I love what you just said, which is, look, there's so much out there. So if you try one thing, or you try 2 things, or you try a few things, or geez, you can't, doing the diet's just really hard right now. There are so many other things to do. And this is where people who kind of haven't dived deep into that biomedical community or the autism community aren't aware of so many different ways that you can help. And I love that you're providing information for everything. And here, and what I do is we go deep dive on the biomedical aspect of it, which is great, but there's so much stuff that I don't offer that you do, information on therapies and information on and kind of navigating through schools and IEPs. And boy, one thing that I want to get a guest on in the future is kind of talking about the finances and trust building,
right?
As not like creating a trust, not trusting people, but creating a trust as your child gets older, especially for kids with these genetic issues, because that's totally different. And you guys, I want to talk more about Dr. Bowles and the genetics later, but it's so great that you offer such a plethora of information across the board for all families.
Right. But that's the problem, is that there's so much. So when somebody gets a diagnosis, they get a diagnosis date similar to mine more times than not. And then they're told and I was told this, love her for who she is, which I just thought was an atrocious thing to tell a mom. Of course, I'm going to love my kid. How dare you tell me not to? Anyhow, that bugged me that day. But love her for who she is and best wishes. That was pretty much what we were told. And that's still the case today. And I don't understand how that's the case today when there are so many more success stories that exist. But the problem is that everybody, and this is the entire reason that Abilities Workshop exists, is because everybody will tell you with a new diagnosis, early intervention, early intervention, early intervention. You got to do it. You got to do it. And so you say, okay, I'll do it. But nobody tells you what it is, right? Nobody tells you that it's occupational therapy and that it's speech therapy and that you have to do this ABA therapy and that you need to see this pediatrician. Nobody tells you how to sign up for it. And so you just know that you're scrambling, you're on a clock here that's expiring quickly, and you've got to figure it out. And so we figured if we could build the platform for you to at least know all the movable parts in the game, that maybe you could figure it out in the right amount of time. But, you know, and I mentioned this last week, so not to be redundant to anybody that heard it before, but I sincerely believe that parents are overstimulated and overwhelmed just as much as our kids. That our kids, you know, those are terms that we say all the time, right? Like, oh, this is overstimulating for them. They can't handle this. But I'm telling you, we walk the life of being overstimulated. And the common list that is in most of our minds is ABA therapy, occupational therapy, music therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, government benefits. What are we going to do when they're transitioning? Guardianship, what does that look like? Is there something I should have signed up for already? Oh, I need to go look at this school. This is an IEP meeting. When am I supposed to schedule that in? All of these things are in our mind. Vacations, can I do a vacation? Do I have the finances to pay for a vacation? Maybe not, because we spent all of our money on our ridiculously expensive kids. But if I do have the money for it, is my kid going to be able to behave well enough for us to actually have a vacation? You know, like our brains think about this stuff every minute of the day, and we're lying to ourselves if we say, oh no, I don't think about that. You think about it all the time, because whatever it is that you've already uncovered, that you started feeling really good about yourself, that's already in the past tense. And now you're wondering what other stuff you haven't uncovered in order to be their champion today. And it's a self-paced master's degree in something you never planned on learning. And you don't know, other than the fact that you're on the clock, because early intervention, you got to do it, you got to do it, you got to do it. Other than the fact you're on the clock, you don't know when you graduate. You don't know if you ever graduate from it. And you have no idea if you're doing it well enough. So you're just out there worried all the time for your child's well-being. And if we're not cutting ourselves a little bit of slack along the way, then it's really sad for us, because we're human too. And so we're overstimulated, we're overwhelmed. And so I sometimes talk about the idea of a 2 o'clock versus a 9 o'clock brain, 2 o'clock in the morning versus 9 o'clock in the morning brain, meaning that if you've ever woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning worried about something, that is an enormous worry at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're scared, you're anxious, you just don't know how to solve that problem. Your brain gets away from you at 2 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, wake up, you're looking at you're thinking about what it was that woke you up at 2 o'clock, but you're realizing it's manageable. I can do this. And so sometimes you'll hear people say, well, write down whatever it is you're worried about on your bedside table, and then look at it in the morning, you'll sleep better, you can figure it out when the day starts. I have that same philosophy for parents that are going through the special needs journey. And for any of you, now I'm self-diagnosed OCD, because some of the different things I like to do, I feel like I am really aligned with the OCD mindset. Can't say that it's 100% true, but gosh, do I identify with those folks. For any of you out there that really like organization and you really like to spend too much money at Office Max or Staples or some office supply store, I'm about to tell you something that's going to make you happy. You have permission to go buy 5 binders. Get the cute ones, get all the dividers that you like, get the things that you think are pretty, the things that make you happy, and create these 5 binders. Because if you put them out of your mind and into this binder, it's going to be better for you, your spouse, your family, and your child. And what's going to happen is the first one is a medical binder. And I promise I'll make this quickly, but note down these 5 different ones, because it really will be a gift to your future self. The first one's a medical binder. Everything from the very first letter of diagnosis through the lab work, through the different doctor's notes that you've taken, put it in one binder. Any allergies, anything that's going on medically speaking, any hospitalizations, just print that stuff out, put it in the binder. And the reason I say that is because when me and my husband, when we go to a doctor's appointment, and they start asking questions, because everybody does, right? When did they first smile? When did they first crawl? When did they first do whatever these things are? These are all questions that are asked. I mean, my daughter's 13. It's really hard for me to remember. They still ask them. You know what my husband has the luxury of doing? Looking over at me, because it's all stored in my server, right? Like, I'm the one that's supposed to just completely relive all of these things. And I answer them, but what if I'm not there? What if I'm not there because I'm on an airplane? What if I'm not there because I am physically incapable of being there? Then what's he going to do? Well, he can grab the binder off of our desk, physical hard copy binder, not a file on my laptop that's with me. but the actual binder, and go and have an educated conversation and say, anything he can't remember would be in front of him. That's the same for, grandparents that are taking care of your kid or anything else. It's just nice to have those at fingertips. That's probably the most important one because you just never know what will happen. The second one, which fights with being the most important, is your day-to-day binder. The day-to-day binder are all of the things that you're asked about all the time. What makes your kid happy? What makes your kid unhappy? How do you calm them down? What are their favorite things? What gets them motivated in the morning? Are they, like in my case, Lindsay loves hugs, right? She loves dancing, she loves songs, she loves hugs. You give her a hug, you high five, something like that, she's great. Other kids, maybe not so much. You touch them, they're going to scream at you. So write down the things that really aggravate them, the things that really make them happy. I'll give you 2 examples of why this is important. One of my colleagues gave a presentation, and when he was talking about it, I said, man, that's a day-to-day binder, it just stored it in my mind. But he said his practice, he does financial advising, he had talked to a client, and the client explained to him, yeah, well, my daughter sits on the right-hand side of the back seat, she's fine, but on the left-hand side, she bangs her head on the window the whole way. And he asked him, he goes, does anybody else know that? He goes, no. That needs to be in your day-to-day binder. And in my case, like I said, I live in Orlando. And so we have the luxury of all the parks around us. And I have kids that are adrenaline junkies. Lindsay is a front row roller coaster girl all day long. It doesn't matter how big, she's ready to go. If we're at a park, we're in her heaven. She is happy to be jumping from one to the next, but she isn't always good about telling me, I'm getting a little thirsty. I'm kind of hungry. She doesn't give me those indicators the way that any of us might do that together. And so all of a sudden she starts breaking on me. I mean, we're real close to meltdown city, all because her blood sugar's dropped or because she's dehydrated. I know that when she starts acting out, that I can give her a meat stick or I can give her something to drink and she's going to be fine. But if nobody else knows that, they're going to be dealing with a really uncomfortable kid that is making their life difficult for maybe an hour or more. That's a day-to-day binder thing. So do those. Have your medical one, have your day-to-day one. The third one is your education binder and therapy binder. So your IEP meetings, print them out, put them in a binder. All of your therapy notes, print them out, put them in a binder. Because when you change therapists, when you change doctors, doctors like to know this information too when it comes to therapy, but when you change schools and teachers and therapists, hand them the binder. You don't have to recall that in your mind anymore. This is it. You get to just do the highlight reel at that point. The fourth is the financial binder. I promise I'm almost done with my words. I promise that to you guys. Soon other people will have a voice. But the fourth one's financial binder. It is the one that is probably the hardest for us to do because we feel like we're being analyzed on if we were a good enough parent. Did we save well enough? Did we plan well enough? It just feels icky. It's like going into the principal's office, but they don't care. They do this all the time. They're trying to come up with a solution. So get your ego out of the way for a minute. Go make a financial plan, because if we're not here to care for our kids, we have to know that they're still going to be cared for. The financial plan is important. And the fifth one is probably my favorite, maybe not the most urgent, but it's a really cool one. And that's your dream about tomorrow folder. When you're walking through places at a resource fair, at a conference, at a convention, whatever it is, and you look at something and you say, oh, my kid's not old enough for that. Or they say, oh, my kid's never going to be able to do that. Take the information anyhow. Because in the next few years, your child might grow leaps and gains. Or when they do get to that age and you can't remember it because all of our different companies start sounding the same, right? Everything. I mean, I'm included in that. We're Abilities Workshop. You know how many abilities, ministries, and things like that there are out there? There's a lot. So you're going to have a hard time remembering the name of a company. Put it in there so that your future self is like, oh, yeah. Hopefully they're still in business and it's something you can check into. But it gives you the extra mental space to be present in today instead of keeping all of this in your own private server of your brain. And it should help you just be able to breathe a little bit easier. You have a plan, you're moving through your plan, you're learning things, you're storing things, and you can go back and review them. And so that's my unsolicited advice portion of the overstimulated, overwhelmed brain for parents. Do yourself a favor.
Well, I love it, and I love that kind of organization, and like you said, hey, this feels a little OCD, but these are the things that will help your child, is getting this stuff organized. Instead, I mean, I know I can't even count the number of times I've done the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. So why bother if you can have it in one place and just access it? So that's awesome. I love this.
You got to make room in your brain for having conversations with Dr. Skowron, because he's going to tell you a lot of things that you're going to just be like, whoa, I need to try this and that. But you don't have any extra space in there because you've used up your whole hard drive. So make space for it.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I'm glad you brought up, the amount of stress that parents are under. It's a lot of stress. And, making sure you can handle that stress is one of the best things you can do to help your kid. And we're actually just a little teaser. We're having another guest speaker on our podcast in 3 weeks, and his work is training people to be centered and training people to be calm and training people to handle stress. So he's going to be working with us in some physical activities that we can do to make ourselves in a better place. But I'm so glad that you bring that up, because it's something that we all need to do,
right,
for sure. So.
I have a friend that spoke in one of our sessions, and I'm totally stealing this from her, but she spoke about self-care. And so many of us think, oh my gosh, you can't do self-care. I can barely get any sleep at night, much less actually go to a spa or something. And wouldn't it be nice if self-care meant going to the spa? I'd sign up for it every day. But the reality is that doesn't fit into most of our lives. But self-care doesn't have to be an expense, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. It could just be a little bit of time by yourself, whether that means that you're walking around the block for 15 minutes by yourself and somebody else is watching the kids for a few minutes. That's self-care, right? You have to be able to take a breath every now and again. You have to be able to say, okay, I know that Dad isn't going to do it as well as I'm going to do it, but I'm okay with that because they're both going to be alive when I get home and walk away for a little bit, right? But what Heather had mentioned, and what I'm totally stealing from her in this moment, she goes, self-care can be as simple as a hidden Snickers bar on top of your refrigerator that nobody else knows about, that you can go and eat in your closet if you want to at midnight. It's just those stolen moments where you're by yourself. And, it doesn't have to be something special and something that you're posting on Facebook. It can just be taking time to breathe. So when I think that so many of us, my son, if he were to fall down and break his arm, the thing I would do, I'd pick him up, I'd rush him to the hospital, I'd get him to set it, I would be on an adrenaline rush fighting for him to be well, right? But when we get a diagnosis like this, we're not in it for the next 2 hours or for the next 8 weeks. This is a journey that you're going to be in for the next year, 5 years, 10 years. You're not going to get through this in a matter of a couple of months for a bone to heal. And so to keep that adrenaline charge of go, 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 and everything else stops in order for this to be healed isn't realistic for you to be able to maintain without burning out. And if you burn out, you're not your child's champion anymore. So you really are an important factor. You can't treat it the same way you would a cold or a virus or a broken bone. You have to just be able to pace yourself. You hear people say that this is a marathon. It really is. You appreciate the small gains, you continue to learn, but you pace yourself and you give yourself the grace to know that you don't have to know everything straight away.
Yeah, no, that's great. So let me ask you this. I want to make sure, excuse me, I want to make sure we're guiding families who are listening to all your information. So number one, where can they go to get this stuff and that you've put together? And number two, what are the most popular things people come to your organization to find, and what are the little hidden gems that you don't think enough people are accessing?
Okay. So the first place to go is to find us at our website. That's abilitiesworkshop.com. That's a lot of I's and T's, I get it. abilitiesworkshop.com. And when you go there, you can find a section for parents. You can find a section for parents and for teachers, mainly because I believe that it takes all three of us for our kids to shine the most. If you have a parent fighting for their child, that's great, but you also need a teacher to understand them and a faith community to support them. And then that's the case, you get to see kids shine their brightest. So we have different designated sections. I very much encourage people to sign up. It's free on the website to be a member, but we have member pages on the website that include me interviewing doing, gosh, I guess there's probably 78 or 80 different interviews of resources from all around the world. They're 5-minute segments on Explore the Spectrum, but it's kind of nice to hear new things if you want to hear 5 to 7-minute little segments. It also gives you access to the Vortex, which is the podcast. You can listen to it on Spotify or you can listen to it there. The podcast is really cool because not only do we have these really great candid conversations about important things with doctors specifically, but we feather in these different conversations with success stories, because it's really exhausting to continue to fight. It's nice to have an emotional boost of something that went well. I'll give you examples of 2 of them. The 2 I talk about probably the most often. One of my friends, her and her daughter were on the show together, and her daughter's name's Angela, and Angela has what she calls the big 3: autism, epilepsy, and cerebral palsy. And when she was in 4th grade, Rory, her mom, was told she's really sweet, but she's uneducatable. And she took on that, and she said, okay. She took her home. She did homeschooling. In 2020, Angela graduated from UCF, magna cum laude, with a degree in creative writing. So not so uneducatable. You know, our kids can do amazing things if you give them the right support.
Right.
Another one of my colleagues, his sister has Down syndrome, and he said when his parents first learned that she had Down syndrome, it was the day she was born, and the doctor said, I'm sorry, most kids with Down syndrome never learn to read. Well, fast forward to today, and she's 34, and she's teaching 2nd graders how to read. You know, like, these stories never get old. And so if you need that emotional pick-me-up of saying, people have defied the odds before, so why not me? Listen to some of the success stories that are in that podcast, because they will certainly lift your spirits and give you a little bit of extra hope where you need it. You know, I've talked to people that have had kids that have had 40 seizures a day to not having a seizure in 5 years. I've talked to, you know, it's just, the list is long, but that's a great hidden gem. And there's also a section in the members pages that is words of encouragement. We're always looking for anybody else that wants to share 2 minutes of encouragement. If you've seen success, send us your video, we'll put you on there. But you can listen to other parents, just regular, everyday parents say, you can do it. I didn't think I could do it, but my kid's now graduating from high school. I didn't think I could do it, but this is happening now. You can do it. And it doesn't have to be that you have to have a big victory story. It can be, you know, I'm telling you that the hard days, there's not as many of them once you're on it for a while. And those voices, your story matters just as much as the rest of our stories matter. So contribute to that. The things that I hear the most are probably the fact that people are dismissed as being, oh, that's never going to happen. And they're robbed of hope, like we were talking about at the beginning, and they just need a little bit of validation and a little bit of encouragement. I often tell people, if you're a caregiver, I'm talking to the people that are your friends right now. If you're friends to a caregiver, for heaven's sake, ask them how they're doing. I'm not asking you to say, how's your son doing? How's your daughter doing? But genuinely ask that caregiver, how are you doing? I've had more parents break down and cry talking to me by saying, nobody asks me that. And we're just barely holding it together, right? We look tough as nails, but it's really like an eggshell. And at any given moment, you just break. And we've got to care about people more and take our opinions and our judgment, which isn't always easy. We got to take a step back with that and just be kind to one another and understand that this is a hard journey and none of us are walking the same one. Even though we may have the same diagnosis, it's a really broad diagnosis. So not to get so easily frustrated with our counterparts out there, because I promise we're all just doing the best we know how to do. We're scared and we don't know that we're making the right decisions. And at the end of the day, being a friend is a big important role in that. Everybody's alone.
Yeah, and I hear that a lot from my patients where, excuse me, you feel so alone, because you're just there, you're in your own, your fishbowl and, trying to get through every day, just trying to make it through the end of the day. So I love that you have that on your website because people need to read it. In fact, Paula just typed, I needed this today. I got the middle of the year IEP session. So sorry again. This is great. This is what everybody wants. There's so many people touting answers out there, and it is a marathon. So, you start something that could potentially help, and you don't know if it will help maybe for weeks to months. And that's a lot, and that's a lot of stress and a big burden. So I love what you put together for
Thank
families.
you. For the person that you mentioned with the IEP, IEPs are sneaky little boogers. Let me tell you, I think that most parents, if they're going to have one day that they cry, it's after an IEP meeting. So for anybody that's not experienced that yet, or if you're putting on your battle armor to go in, understand the scenario there. You go into an IEP meeting and you have a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, you have their teacher, the teacher assistant, you have a guidance counselor, you have a principal, you have 8 people around this table and you. And even on their best day, they're telling you all of your child's deficits one by one by one, because they're trying to tell you how they're going to help them. But by the time you get to the 8th person that is telling you something else that's wrong with your kid, it hurts. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And, go ahead and know that that's going to be a hard day. Go ahead and clear your schedule after that, because you're not going to be functional for anything else that day. And go do something that's uplifting. IEPs are probably the hardest thing, and they are just so easily dismissed because they think, oh, well, we're trying to help. And they are trying to help. If you've got a good team, they are. But it really hurts to hear all of the things that are wrong with your kid after one, after another, after another. Because if they're following you, Dr. Skowron, if you've got listeners on here, we tend to look at things with a glass half full, right? I am still caught telling people things and I'm like, man, is that really 100% accurate, or is that only the way I see it? Because I tend to look at all of the gains that she's had. And so when you have somebody being brutally honest with you, it's painful. So, a little extra niceness to yourself on a day that you're going in for an IEP, and stand your ground in there. Don't be a snot to the people, because I think they are probably trying to help, but stand your ground and know that you know your kid better than anybody else, and that you're their advocate. Don't let them push you around.
No, exactly. Excuse me again. I love that, and I want to kind of take that and go into our live questions that we've got. So before we start answering our live questions, can you give a website shout out again where people
Yeah,
can
absolutely. So it's abilitiesworkshop.com. So it's
abilities?
the plural. That's right.
All right, let's get to some of the live questions. And again, if you're not listening live, if you're listening later, you can always take part in a live recording of our podcast on our Facebook page, Spectrum Awakening, every Thursday at 12:15 Eastern Standard Time. All right, live shout out to Jeannie. Jeannie watches regularly and was very happy she could see and hear us today, since we had some technological issues last week. Magda from Massachusetts, hope you guys are doing well. It's been a long time since I've seen you. Gotta said, separate question. My child's tyrosine level is a 53. Should they try tyrosine supplements? And I would, Gotta. We have attention on the double as our tyrosine supplement. It's going to stimulate dopamine production in the brain. We've got a tasteless powder. We've got a capsule. Try that and see how they respond. Treasure's watching. She's a regular. Colleen, hello. What causes someone with autism to pick their hands and fingers until they bleed? What can be done about this? They're nonverbal. So let me answer from my point of view. And Jeanetta, if you have any tips, that would be great. I see that kind of behavior as an anxiety behavior. So, and kids on the spectrum have, whoop, there goes the, you never know there we go. You never know with the ring light what's going to happen. So what I see it as a sign of anxiety. And so if you haven't tried supplements to boost serotonin levels, like our super serotonin or 5-HTP, I would try that. Jeanetta, any thoughts on that?
I was listening to your answer, but I believe that you're 100% on. I think that it is anxiety. Just like our kids have these different fidget toys that kind of keep their hands busy. I mean, I think that they have a hard time with scabs. Then all of a sudden it's a sensory thing and that feels funny, and so I'm going to pick at that and I'm going to do this. I don't know, but I definitely think that it starts with having an anxiety underneath of it. It's something that we have to be mindful of too. Anytime Lindsay gets a scab, I try to put a Band-Aid over it as fast as I can, because otherwise and she doesn't even know she's doing it.
Yeah.
She just unconsciously is messing with it, and then it takes 10 times longer to heal.
Yeah. It's like Joey in that Friends episode when he had chicken pox. He had to wear the hot mitts.
Oh, I like you better when you're making my friend's reference. All right, go ahead.
That's all right. It's a Gen X thing to do. Carmen says, so glad you're having this conversation. Thank you for giving us hope. Of course, that's why we're here. Sorry, I'm trying to make more adjustments to my stand. All right, see, Liz. Next is Kay. Kay's from Kentucky, Natalie's grandma. She's on. She's a regular. Good to see you. We've got Rahila was asking about Dr. Bowles. So you did talk about an interview on your podcast with Dr. Richard Bowles. He, in my opinion, is probably one of the top autism geneticists out there. Great guy, good friend of mine. He taught me about genetics. And obviously, I talk a lot about genetics on our podcast. I order so much genetic testing on our kids. And I think in the biomedical community, I order a lot of probably one of the most genetic testing out there, except people who are geneticists. So I've learned almost everything from him. He's great. His research is great. He practices out of LA and Philadelphia. If you're interested in seeing him, you can just Google Richard Bowles, Boles, and make sure to listen to the podcast with him that you have as well.
Yep. We released our newest one with him talking about this research study. Today's Thursday, so that would have been yesterday. Yeah. So it's on Spotify, it's on our website. But it really, I mean, I'm telling you that it's earth-shattering research. This is the coolest thing, is to have somebody that has written over 100 papers, research papers, an academic brain, giving answers, saying we can find the answers now. We can find them. And it doesn't have to be a game of whack-a-mole. We can find the underlying exact reason in these cases to understand where autism developed from. And honestly, he and I talk about how everybody's right, that genetics and environment play factors together, that your genetics are part of the reason that the environment can impact it. And it's a really well-rounded conversation. People don't have to argue over, is it genetics, is it environment? It's both. Right. And you just have to understand it to, try to treat it and to work with it. But it is wild to know that there are academic papers now being published that say autism is treatable. And if you needed that as your dose of hope today, take it, run with it, because I can't believe I get to say those words and they're legit. It's not just me wishing it.
No, it's great. And again, we've shared research that a third of kids on the spectrum have a genetic cause. And if you're a girl, it's up to 45 to 50% of them have a genetic cause. And what I always talk about with genetics is if you don't test, you don't know. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my families that I work with in my telemedicine clinic are very hesitant about genetic testing because they think it's not a death sentence, but they think it's just like, okay, I've sealed my doors of hope. Mm-hmm. If I get something back on this genetic, like, hey, you've got this genetic condition, whatever it may be, that it seals the doors and I can't do anything. And I think that's why a lot of people are hesitant to do the testing. But if you can take that answer and treat it, then why wouldn't you do the testing?
That's exactly right. That's it. It's not that you're sealing your fate. And, I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective. It's not that you're sealing your fate. It's that you're finally giving yourself the answers that you've wanted to know since the day they were diagnosed.
Exactly.
You're finally being able to say, okay, I understand how we got to where we're at. And if you understand how you got there, then you can figure out your way out of there.
Right.
And so, it doesn't, I can't say it's a solve all for everything, but it's pretty darn close to being able to give you as many answers as you've ever sought. Yeah. And that's just, think about how far the biomedical community and the research has gone in the last 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
It went from, we kind of have an idea, to now we can tell you specifically answers. That's insane.
Yeah.
And for families to dismiss it, is crazy. I have not, I'm being completely honest right now, I've not done genetic testing with Lindsay until now. Right. Because, we were making gains and we were doing things and we did, but I know that there's still work to do with her. So now it's like, okay, brass tacks, I've got to get down to it and find out what is it that we've been trying to figure out all this other time. So, I have a shirt that I wear that says perfectly imperfect. By all means, I don't have it all together, but I know a lot of really smart people.
Yeah, exactly. And again, for those of you who are interested in genetic testing or wonder, hey, what genetic testing are we talking about? You can either go to your physician and say, hey, I'd like genetic testing for my child, they have autism. Or we have these genetic tests on our website. So you can go to our website. What we have is a cheek swab. It's like a Q-tip, and you just get some saliva on it and send it in. So we want to make sure that these answers are easily available for you guys. Question from May: can you stay on vitamin A long term? I would test vitamin A levels after you use a bottle. So if you use a bottle of vitamin A like our ViraClear, test your vitamin A levels, make sure they're within normal limits, and then you can do another bottle. But vitamin A levels can get a little high, so you just want to make sure you're safe. Another question from May: what are your thoughts on this? My son has a lot of OCD, and we'll follow up with their patients of ours. 3 days the OCDs are back, like touching the floor. What do you think I should do? He's on turmeric and NAC and digestive enzymes. Well, what I would think about, and Jeanetta would love your opinion on, hey, here's kids with OCD kind of habits. Number one, because of the time of year it is, and we're going to have our podcast next week on this, is allergies and histamine. So histamine, we're all familiar with histamine and allergies, but histamine is also a brain stimulant. It's an excitatory chemical for the brain, causes hyperactivity, causes anxiety, causes sleep problems. So we may want to start to look into our histamine issues, whether that be supplements like we have, like our Allergon or our histamine C products. But from a medical standpoint, because of the time of year, I would think about that. Jeanetta, any thoughts on the OCD?
No, I'm not even going to pretend to be as smart as you on that. Nope. I'm learning along with everyone else.
That's, what? That's it. You know so much more than I do because you've got this umbrella knowledge. I'm hyper focused in one thing, but the umbrella knowledge of what we can do, OT wise or anything, you've got stuff that I don't. So let me move on to the next question. We got a live shout out from Diane. Let's see. We've got a kind of a comment from Jocelyn. Jocelyn says, my son who's 16 is more sensitive. If we're talking about emotional sensitivity, that can get really wonky during puberty. I know he's 16, so he's been in puberty for a good 3-4 years probably. But we may want to start to look at hormone levels if that's when the anxiety came on. If it's not when the anxiety came on, we might be looking at PANDAS or PANS or gut infections. So think about the timing of all that, Jocelyn, if that helps. Stacy says, OMG, the vacation comment is 100% agree. So I think people feel you there. They're like, hey, I want to go do something, but can I afford it? Can I take my kid? What do I do? Where do I go? It's a lot.
It's heartbreak because here's the reality of our kids, right? For some reason, the moment that they're born, I mean, the moment that they're born, they're handed to you and you can picture their whole future. And you're picturing your family's future. Like the moment that Lindsay was handed to me in the hospital, I was thinking, how cool is it that Jackson's 2 years older than her? That means he can drive her to high school. He's 2 and she's a newborn, and I'm thinking of him driving her to high school. I've got all these things that just come into my mind. And our family vacations are part of that vision. And when we get a diagnosis, that vision gets shattered. And it's heartbreaking to have to deal with all of the different pieces that are broken that no longer work the way that we had hoped. But vacations are one of them. And I think that that's, IEPs, I talk about crying. I think that when you're at the beginning of summer and everybody's planning their great big trips or whatever they're doing, and you realize you can't do that either because you can't afford to or because you can't physically have your child in that situation, it's a real worthy moment for you to be able to feel sad and to be grieving what you wished it could be, and then pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep moving forward.
Right. No, that's great. Next question is from Fino. It says, hey, Doc, how long, this is a supplement question, how long do we keep kids on alpha lipoic acid? And do you think our Mitomax and Panda Bear product have enough vitamin A to treat a deficiency? Well, the vitamin A question, I would just test. So if you're taking supplements, you give it 3 months, retest to see where your levels are at. As for the alpha lipoic acid, I would say long-term until your toxins are within normal levels. So keep checking those toxins. Alpha lipoic acid, ALA, is a great detox supplement, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and has a lot of good research on helping our kids. Jocelyn, which typed some comments before, is talking about, it seems like her 16-year-old doesn't want to go outside or socialize with everybody. She doesn't know what to do. Again, this sounds like anxiety, but is it coming from the brain and like a serotonin deficiency, or does this have to do with puberty hormones? I would think about when that happened, and then we can really go deep on that cause. Jeannie says, yes, the 2 a.m. brain. You were talking about the 2 a.m., 9 a.m. brain. The 2 a.m. brain is mine near every morning. This live is so spot on. I so needed this today.
Oh.
So thank you. And Jeannie's on every week, so that's awesome. Keisha says, I know early intervention is important, but some of us are past that and need to know that it's not too late. What do you want to say to Keisha?
So okay, so I'm obviously not a doctor, so you can fill in all the medical advice here, but I'm going to tell you that it's never too late, that our kids continue to make progress, and while they might have a big window of opportunity in brain development when they're young, I compare this, and now tell me if I'm wrong or right, Dr. Skowron, I really want your input on this, but I often say, do our men and women that end up with a TMI at war come back and nobody work with them? Do they just give up on them because they say, oh, well, you're 40 and you had a traumatic brain injury and I'm done with you? They don't. They work with that human being at 40 or older or whatever age they are, and they continue to try to see what they can do to make gains with them. Our kids are the same way. Will the trajectory be the same? Maybe not, but will they improve? Absolutely. You give them, what is it? It's presumed competence with the Spellers movement. Presume competence in your kid and presume abilities inside of them. You just keep fighting for them and they'll keep making gains. And, everybody's story will be different on where they end up, but don't ever stop. I don't think that there's any time that you should say, okay, well, they're 18, so,
Yeah.
wash my hands of this. No, keep going.
Keep going. And I agree completely. From a medical standpoint, the body is always healing itself. It never stops healing until the day that we're no longer alive. So that we just need to kind of nurture and encourage that brain healing as much as possible. So it's never too late. We just have that. Really, the question is, how much improvement are we looking at? Are we looking at 50%, 75%, 100%? How much improvement can we get? But there's always improvement.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see if we've got more questions here. We've got Brianna. I'm going to leave this to you. Have either of you seen improvement in kids who do primitive reflex integration?
You're leaving that to me?
Yes, I don't do that kind of therapy in my office. So.
Okay, so the answer is yes. I have seen a number of different people in the community that have seen success with starting work with them. Chiropractors have a lot of success in being able to work with our kids. They look at things differently. They look at the body differently. They're just trained differently. And so I encourage you to get a well-rounded team of people so that you're looking at things that are happening cellularly and in the body, as well as things that can be identified through somebody like a chiropractor, because chiropractors really have made amazing gains with a lot of our kids on being able to do stuff. And they recognize things that others don't. Like, I took Lindsay to a chiropractor the first time and I didn't notice anything. He had to walk across the room and walk back, and he goes, you notice every time she walks back and she's having to say her ABCs that she clenches her fist over here? And I'm like, no, but I do now. And so, there's just other things that people are trained to be able to recognize, and they have a skill set to be able to show improvements when they recognize something that they can fix. So just expand your team. You don't have to go all in on any one of them. Just make sure that you're getting good advice from a sound group of people.
Love it. All right, we've got time for a couple more questions. Let's see. We've got Sherry, who's on often, says she's so tired of hope stealers. And I agree.
Me too.
Let's see. Carmen says, thank you for bringing up the 5 binder system. Her hard drive is full and her system crashes all the time. So get it like the old school Gen Xers, get it in paper.
Yeah.
Diane says the stress is an understatement, completely overwhelmed. Let's see. We've got Sandy. Hey, Sandy. I hope Rob's doing okay. Sandy made this comment during our IEP conversation. She said that was the worst day of her life.
I'm sorry.
So I'm sure we can all feel that way. Sylvia says, so true. I go do something fun after an IEP meeting. Gergana literally wrapped up the yearly IEP after a 2-week fight for my kid to stay in the gen ed class. Keisha says, I usually start the IEP by giving a presentation of my son's strengths and how he's grown in my vision for him to set the tone. Got a couple hearts from Magda. Iwa says, my son has become more agitated for about 2 weeks. Could it be something in the intestines like candida overgrowth? Definitely. Whenever you see changes in behaviors, the first thing I think about is a gut infection, which is super common. You also want to look at changes in the diet, what changes were made at school or therapies. And again, like I mentioned to another question, allergy season, histamine, this can be a behavior problem causer as well. And if you haven't listened, I recorded a podcast with Temple Grandin a couple months ago, and she mentioned something really interesting about the new LED light bulbs. Cheap LED light bulbs actually flicker. They flicker so fast we can't see it with the naked eye, but you can record a video on your phone and watch it in slow motion. And if that light is flickering, because the cheap ones do, that causes a lot of stress to our kids because we can pick it up subconsciously. So again, if your kid is fine in one building but bad in another building, it could be that environmental stressor that we may not be able to see or we may not be able to recognize. And Temple's great anyway. Diane says, my son has massive anxiety to the point where he has to fear to be in the bathtub or ride his bike. I stopped giving him lithium orotate. That is why. Anything else I can add to ease his fear? Well, again, and Diane would love, Jeanetta would love some, tips that you may have. From a medical standpoint, I want everybody to make sure they're trying serotonin supplements like our super serotonin. I'm also a big fan of our Spectrum Tranquility supplement, which is an herbal calming combo. A lot of people use CBD, so I think there's a lot of great biomedical things. Jeanetta, any other kind of tips?
No, I mean, I think that we all are probably pretty well versed in routine and just helping them understand this is what's coming next and, kind of walking them through what the expectations are usually lowers anxiety a little bit, but that's something practical that you probably already do as a parent on saying, okay, we're going to do this. The best thing that I think I ever learned from ABA, and you can love it, hate it, all in the middle, I don't care. It is what it is. But one of the best things I ever learned from it is first this, then that, right? Like that works on our kids, it works on our spouses, it works on everybody. And so help them say, okay, if we do this, then we can do that, and help them rationalize things or just know what to expect. And maybe that'll help in some way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's awesome. I love it. So this is about the time that we have for our live questions. An hour goes super fast. We had a couple shout outs from a couple of our other viewers, Iwa from the UK, Maria, who listens live from Sweden. So I love that our podcast can get to people all over the world. That's the magic of technology. So thank you for sharing all that you've done. I mean, what you offer parents is obviously the product of your journey and you recording your journey. And now you've got all these things that you are offering to other families and other parents, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They can go get all this stuff from you. I give them this little piece. I give them the biomedical, but you've got so much.
It's funny how we all have to work together. We all rise together. There are so many families that need help, and they all need help a little bit differently. And if we work together, like in a conversation like this, we really can make a difference. And if the families out there start working with the other families out there, we can all make a difference together. We don't have to have so much infighting about things. We can recognize what each person's doing and try to help one another. That's really important. Really cool that you give so much props to what we do, because it is really expansive and it is very helpful. But we're just here to help. We're just nothing but a team of parents and coaches and professionals that really do want to make a difference in this community. So as Pollyanna as that might sound, all you have to do is call us and we'll help any way that we can.
Well, I love it. And you know what, you guys have, I get asked so many questions, during my office visits with patients that I just don't have answers for. But you've been through that and you've got it. So let's give everybody your website one more time so to make sure they can check it out.
Please do. It's abilitiesworkshop.com. ABILITIES, abilities, plural, workshop.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. Thanks for being a guest on our podcast. I hope everybody goes to her website, abilitiesworkshop.com. If you need the coupon for the weekend for Spectrum Awakening, it's LAB20, LAB20. That'll get you 20% off this weekend. And thanks again, Jeanetta, for coming on. It was really great to have you.
Yeah, genuinely genuinely appreciate you having me and letting us talk together to all of the folks that know that you're a hero of the community.
Well, anytime. We like you said, we all do our bit, and we're all in this together. So nobody's alone. We're all here.
That's it.
All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in to Autism Awakening, and we hope to see you next week.